whenever I'm rereading, I really just go balls to the wall for it. Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video, we are going to be doing my December TBR. Alright, before I get to anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments what's the last book that you reread. Because as per usual, I am going to be sticking with my tradition of rereading for all of December. I love doing this. It allows me to return to some books and some stories that I've really enjoyed in the past. It also means I can get a little ahead on content planning when it comes to December, and actually a little bit of January, because yes, my overachiever brain does already have like the next 2 to 3 months planned out. But another thing I've really grown to enjoy more and more as I do these rereads is getting to annotate the books that I love. Sometimes I do annotate my first read through, other times I'm a little hesitant. Whenever I'm rereading, I really just go balls to the wall for it. And I'm absolutely excited to do that with some of these books. Now, last December, I had a really ambitious stack. And then in December, some really crazy stuff was happening in my personal life. So I really did not get to read nearly as much as I wanted to. Once again, this year, I have a very ambitious stack, and I'm hoping and praying that things will be a little bit more calmer, and that means I can actually read through a good few of these. So starting at the top is 2 books that I did kind of roll over from last year since I didn't end up getting to them, and I do still want to revisit them. First one is Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory by Caitlin Doughty. I listened to the audiobook of this, like, it can't have been in 2020, could it? It's been a few years, but I didn't have a physical copy, and I really enjoyed reading it. I learned so much about this industry, and also just Caitlin Doughty as a storyteller, I think, is really great. She has a phenomenal personality that comes through in her prose, and so I do want to reread this one. And like I said, I think I'll go through and annotate just like some interesting facts that I'll probably be reminded of, some good lines here and there, and also just any funny moments as well. I think the little blurb on the front is perfect when it says this book is morbidly funny, because yes, it is. It's very sad at times, but I think it's also one of those kind of industries where you have to find some levity, you have to find some humor in it, because otherwise you go crazy. So this is at the top of the list. It's not too long, which goes against the grain of basically the rest of this TBR, honestly. So let's hope this one at the very least gets read. Another rollover from last year, which I had barely started into. In fact, I think my bookmark, yeah, I got 75 pages into The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern in a reread last year. I also listened to the audiobook of this one a good few years ago and loved it. I love Morgenstern's writing. This is definitely like the purple prose that I really enjoy. Super whimsical, super atmospheric. It just drags you into the story. I fell in love with the little dueling and romance that develops in this one. I think the way the author lays out some of the storytelling elements and how she presents them throughout is just really clever, and I want to be able to appreciate those again. So like I said, I got 75 pages in last year. I might just go ahead and restart, and I did already have a few annotations, but I'm guessing the further in I get, I'm gonna have a lot more. Continuing from a series that I did start or reread into last year, Ravensong by T.J. Klune. One of the few books I did reread in last December was Wolfsong, and I loved it just as much the second time around. The family feels, the emotional punch that Klune gives you in this series, and this is my favorite of the series because it has my favorite sort of character, which is a cinnamon roll who has the thickest exterior of being an asshole. Yeah, Gordo has a lot of daddy issues and some abandonment issues, and I don't care. I love him so dearly. The second chance romance with like enemies to lovers energy in this book also is just delicious. The family that develops here is so good. I've just realized I've not been giving summaries of these books. Well, I kind of did for the first one. If you somehow don't know what The Night Circus is about, it is a very atmospheric, vibey book in which you're following this night circus that travels around and majestically appears, and then there are these 2 magicians who have trained prodigies, and the prodigies end up doing duels utilizing the night circus as their dueling ground, essentially. They're not fights, it's not a battle really, it's more a competition, but at the same time these proteges end up slowly starting to fall for one another, and it's a wonderful time. It is very much this writing style has to work for you, because if it does, you'll love it. If it doesn't, this is gonna be a slog and you're gonna hate every second. Ravensong is the second in the Green Creek series, which is starting with a main character of Ox who lives in this really small town. Unfortunately, his father ended up leaving him and his mother, and everything in his life changes when the Bennett family family ends up moving back to town. And Gordo, who is our main character here, is kind of like Ox's surrogate big brother and continuously keeps telling Ox that he needs to stay away from these Bennets. But unfortunately, that doesn't really work, especially because from the first interaction that Ox has with the youngest of the family, Joe, they end up being best friends. The series does have lots of sweet and wholesome moments. It's also a little bit spicy at times, but it is also such a punch in the gut. Balloon will rip your heart out and then pop it back in and then rip it out again later. That's how this whole series goes. One of these is very much not like the others, and that is Bunny by Mona Awad. And I've been wanting to get my hands on a physical copy ever since, and I finally did, and I want to go through and reread it. Awad's work is another one that works very well for me. It is surrealist and weird, and this one kind of looks at like themes of academia and feminism and cults. But we're following this woman who is getting her, I think, like her graduate degree in literature, and in one of her writing courses, she is the only student who is not a member of this group of girls that call themselves the Bunnies, but they end up inviting her to come along to some of their smut salons that they put on, and Samantha does not realize what she is in for. I mean, toxic and codependent friendships kind of get talked about in this, like the influence other people have on you. This was such a falling down the rabbit hole story. I totally get why it's gotten so much praise, and I do want to revisit it. Like I said, I want to go through and kind of just look at this in a literary lens and really annotate the crap out of it. I don't do that a lot anymore, but this author is one where like I want to do that with every one of her books. And so this is going to be the start of that project. It's pretty unlikely because even though we are getting down to the 40s right now, we're still hitting up into the mid 70s. But if for some reason I'm getting really, really tired of the cold weather, then Something Wild and Wonderful by Anita Kelly is going to be the perfect book to take me out of that, because this is a really cute romance that I fell in love with when I had an arc of it. I adored this one. The character work done in both of our main characters is phenomenal. So this is following two men who end up meeting while hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, and the friendship and relationship that eventually blooms between the two of them. I loved this one. It's my favorite of the series, and I finally have a copy. So yes, I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna annotate every single little moment between these two. There's also some great representation in this. Ben is Portuguese. 𝗖cie comes out later in life, and then for most of the book he is very autistic coded. I don't think it's really spoiler to say that later on he does get diagnosed, but it is so freaking cute. Like I said, the character work between both of them is phenomenal, and the romance is just the best. I can't wait. Okay, and then these last two I have previously annotated, so this is going to be an interesting process going back to annotate again. And I don't think I've really done that before. But first is The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reid. This is my favorite of this author's work, and I think it's because the compilation of tropes in it just works so well for me. So this is based in Hungarian history and Jewish mythology, but we start the story following 𝗖cie, who is a woman of this pagan village in which all of the women have some sort of magic ability, except for her. However, every year some woodsmen from the closest kingdom come and take one of these witch girls to be a sacrifice for the king. This year, the village ends up volunteering 𝗖cie to be the sacrifice. However, not long into the journey, most of her captors end up passing in a pretty gruesome way, and she ends up alone with Gaspar, and the two of them have to rely on one another to make it through this forest, but also eventually end up having to rely on one another to try and stop a civil war from breaking out. Y'all know I love mythology, but also the religious themes that go on in this are so well done. And then there is this forced proximity plus forced to rely on you for survival, enemies to lovers romance that is just so good. It's definitely a little slow burn. Our characters are angry and antagonistic towards each other, and like I just ate up every moment of it. Having read it previously, I can say there are some critiques to it. The first half and the second half do feel very separate. There's some serious pacing changes in the like events going on in the first half of the book versus the second half. But this is one where like I couldn't get it out of my head after I read it. So even though I can like logically see issues with it, this still ended up slowly getting bumped up to a 5-star read for me. Again, I cannot wait to revisit it. I was just flipping through and looking at some of my annotations, and apparently I did this at one point. I guess that was my way of just being like, just read this whole chapter. This is the chapter you're looking for. Lastly, another one that I did previously annotate, and I annotated a freaking lot. Like, I literally had people asking me if this was homework, like a college course. No, this is what I was doing for fun. And yeah, I'm gonna go through and do it again. And that one is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. Fully blaming the decision to reread this on Julia in my book club, because she talked about it a few months ago, and ever since then, it's made me want to reread it. I think she said she's reread the series like 4 times at this point, and the series is not even completed. We still do not know when 𝗖cie the Ninth is coming out, and it's heartbreaking to me. But I also know this is a series like I will need to reread before I get to the 4th book, because Muir's brain is insane. The level of things that they set out and then end up being so important later on in the series is just crazy. It's so clever. So the synopsis that gets tossed around for this one is lesbian necromancers in space, which yes, that is very accurate. I would add on to that and say lesbian necromancer in space who hates her security guard gets trapped in a gothic castle to solve a murder mystery. This is another series that's pretty divisive. Like, if it works for you, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But you see everything through the eyes of Gideon Nav. Gideon is an orphan of the 9th house and absolutely hates the daughter Harrow Hark. But the two of them end up striking a deal when Harrow Hark travels to this gothic space palace to try and become a lictor, which is basically like a right hand to their god. And if Gideon helps Harrow Hark succeed, then Harrow Hark will give Gideon her freedom. However, like I said, a murder mystery ensues, but half of the fun of this first book is the fact that Gideon doesn't know what's going on either. You are just as lost as Gideon is. And like I said, when I read this the first time, I annotated a lot. I really did. And so this is going to be very fun to reread, because I've been told that upon reread, you always notice more and you really appreciate everything Muir does even more, which I don't know how it's possible, because I freaking love this woman's writing now. But this is also going to be the start of another reread series. It's going to be Project. Again, I know I'm going to need to do it before 𝗖cie, and I still don't know when 𝗖cie is coming out. Please, Tamsin Muir, please give it to me. Please, I want it so badly. So like I said, this is pretty ambitious, because I want to reread all of these books physically if I can. I don't want to rely on audiobooks. And there's a good few chunkers in here. I don't know if this is going to happen, but I'm going to be positive. I'm going to hope for the best. And I hope that you guys have a wonderful December reading month as well. So on that note, that is it for today, y'all. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave me the bunny emoji in the comments. I have all my socials, as well as a few ways you can support me, linked in the description. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!